China is criticizing Japan's handling of Fukushima nuclear wastewater. But what China is doing is so much worse. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. Good news. For once, China isn't fighting over the South China Sea. Instead, it's fighting over the entire Pacific Ocean. Japan is planning to release treated nuclear wastewater from their Fukushima Daiichi plant into the Pacific Ocean. And China is not happy about it. Oh my gosh, do I agree with China on something? Now, there are very good reasons that China might be concerned about this, but China has ulterior motives for how it's reacting. I'll tell you why, but first let me explain what's happening. Back in 2011, Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant was struck by a massive tsunami after a 9.0 magnitude earthquake offshore. It caused reactors to overheat and contaminate water in the plant with radioactive material. Since then, Japan has been using new water to cool the damaged reactors, buying time to develop a plan to deal with them. It's been storing nuclear wastewater in about 1,000 tanks, equivalent to about 500 Olympic-sized swimming pools. But that can't last forever. The tanks containing the treated water are already over 97% full. That's why Japan wants to gradually discharge the nuclear wastewater over the next several decades after extensive filtering and treatment. Gradually releasing toxic material for over a decade? What is this, Twitter? Lots of people, understandably, aren't really cool with dumping nuclear wastewater into the Pacific Ocean. Many worry about how it could affect human and animal DNA. Is this going to be another case of The Simpsons did it? But an independent 2-year review by the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, found Japan's plans to release treated water consistent with international safety standards. They said it would have a negligible radiological impact on people and the environment. South Korea also sent a team of experts and made the same conclusion. However, I don't think the South Korean public agreed. People distrusting scientists and the government? As an American, I can't relate to that at all. But China sees the South Korean protests as an excellent opportunity to get rid of a China hawk president and drive a wedge between South Korea and Japan. I'll tell you how after the break. Welcome back. China sees the Fukushima water release as a tool to drive a wedge between South Korea and Japan. The Chinese state-run media is playing up the drama. It's funny how China suddenly cares about the environment and public safety when their enemies are involved. If only they put half the effort into dealing with the toxic chemicals in their own people's drinking water. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said that by discharging nuclear-contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean, the Japanese side may violate obligations stipulated in international law, because China is definitely the go-to role model for upholding international law. Chinese state-run media even claimed that Japan's plan is a colluded betrayal of the public interests of mankind and marine ecology. China's thinking if anyone's going to kill all the fish in the ocean, it's going to be us. China is now banning Japanese seafood and boycotting Japanese cosmetics. I don't know why. If you want your skin to glow, Fukushima water sounds like the ticket. But here's the thing. What China is doing with its own nuclear waste is actually much worse. Certain radioactive material is much harder to get rid of through treatment. For example, tritium, a radioactive form of hydrogen. And that's been released in all the water discharges in all the nuclear power plants all over the world for the last 60 years. And get this, in most of these cases, there is tritium at higher levels than what is planned with Fukushima, especially with the nuclear wastewater released by China. According to the Yomiuri Shimbun, one of the largest newspapers in Japan, Chinese nuclear power plants regularly release water containing tritium at levels up to 6.5 times higher than the planned Fukushima discharge. Here's how much tritium Fukushima plans to release. And here's how much 4 Chinese nuclear power plants release each year. China, of course, dismisses Japan's claims. China said that there are essential differences between the nuclear-contaminated water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant in Japan and the normal liquid effluents from nuclear power plants worldwide. So China's not actually denying Japan's claims, it's just arguing that its own nuclear wastewater is different somehow. In fact, China has a horrible track record for handling nuclear waste, like when it just dumped a bunch in Tibet. According to the International Campaign for Tibet, the 9th Academy, China's primary nuclear weapons R&D facility in Tibet, allowed 100 tons of liquid mercury to be dumped into the Yellow River. Probably time to rename it the Silvery River. Radioactive waste also was directly dumped into Lake Kokonor in the form of liquid slurry, solid, and gaseous wastes. Either that or it was disposed of in shallow, unlined landfills. And yes, they had solid, liquid, and gaseous waste. If only they had nuclear jello, they'd have completed the toxic forms of matter set. To no one's surprise, there were reports of illnesses, birth defects, and deaths resulting from nuclear exposure. You see, unlike the West, China's willing to gamble also on nuclear power plant safety. Like when a fuel rod was damaged in the Taishan nuclear power plant in 2021. In most countries, this would have warranted a shutdown, but China denied that there was any danger at the plant, which is not very reassuring considering that the plant had multiple other problems such as electrical malfunction and an incident with a burst of radioactive gas. It's almost like communist countries don't have a great track record with nuclear safety. You know, it's bad when Homer Simpson is a more competent nuclear safety inspector. China Uncensored would not exist without support from viewers like you. Frequent demonetization and age restriction by YouTube would have run us out of business. Most of our budget comes from fan support on our exclusive social media site on Locals. That's ChinaUncensored.locals.com. For a small monthly contribution, you'll get a bunch of cool perks, including the chance to have me answer your questions on the show. Today's question comes from DPR of DC. Serious question, will Kissinger be remembered as a hero or hot garbage for his role in U.S.-Taiwan-China relations? That's an excellent question. Henry Kissinger may be single-handedly responsible for making U.S.-China relations what they are. He spearheaded the mission to get Nixon in China, and he pushed what gets called the engagement school. That's the idea that we have to do business with China, and if we do, they'll reform and become a democracy. Bill Clinton was a big proponent of that. He normalized trade with China, and American manufacturing died. To this day, you still have people pushing this idea. The Biden administration started out fairly tough on China, carrying over many Trump-era China policies. But over time, the engagement school started influencing things, to the extent that the U.S. gave up vital self-interest to get Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen access to China. But you know who didn't have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get into China? Kissinger. He just met with Xi Jinping, something top U.S. officials have been desperately and cravenly trying to get. The Biden administration wishes they had Kissinger's access. So for many, Kissinger is a hero. But I think as time goes on, it will only become more and more clear that Kissinger's legacy was one that empowered an authoritarian regime and devastated the United States, especially as we edge closer to war with China over Taiwan. So thanks for your question and your support, DPR of DC. And thank you for watching. Remember, check out our exclusive social media site, ChinaUncensored.locals.com. Link is below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.